Under the 1950 constitution, India is a parliamentary democracy. India is the largest democracy in the world by number of citizens. Since independence, a solid democratic system has developed in India in which the separation of powers between the executive, legislative, and judiciary and federalism form the most important pillars. Despite countless problems, surveys show that the Indian population has a high level of support for democracy and its institutions. Necessary reforms are progressing slowly due to the size and diversity of the country. The Indian Union is the most populous democracy in the world with more than 1.2 billion people. There are regular elections, competition between political parties, and basic rights enshrined in the constitution. Despite widespread poverty, ethnic, religious, and linguistic heterogeneity and deep-rooted prejudice between caste groups, India has managed to build a solid democratic system since independence on August 15th in 1947. On January 26th in 1950, after more than 3 years of deliberations, the new constitution came into force, establishing India as a parliamentary democracy and union state. The first elections followed in December and January 1950-1951. They brought a clear victory for the Congress Party led by Jawaharlal Nehru, who was elected the first Prime Minister of the Union of India. As the head of the country is the president, who as head of state is supposed to symbolize the unity and diversity of the Indian nation. Of the 13 presidents since 1950, 9 have been Hindus, 3 have been Muslims, and 1 has been a Sikh. With President KR in 1997, Narayanan held the highest office in the state for the first time. From 2007 to 12, Pratil Patil was the first woman to head the state. Pranab Mukherjee held the office since 2012. The president is elected by an electoral college made up of members of the 2 chambers of parliament and the state parliaments. His term of office is 5 years. Re-election is possible. The president has extensive powers. Among other things, it appoints the prime minister, decides on the imposition of a state of emergency, and can dismiss state governments. In line with British democracy, however, the actual center of power in the country is not the president, but the prime minister and the council of ministers. The division of powers with the president was regulated by constitutional amendments clearly in favor of the prime minister. The prime minister is usually the lead candidate from the strongest party or the majority faction in the Lok Sabha, India's lower house, as was the case with Nehru, Indira Gandhi or Atal Bihari Vajpayee. In 2004, there were violent protests against the designated Prime Minister Sonia Gandhi because of her Italian origins. She finally resigned from office in favor of Manmohan Singh after the election victory of the Congress Party-led United Progressive Alliance or UPA. The Prime Minister is formally elected by the Lok Sabha for 5 years and is also re-electable. The longest tenure was held by Jawaharlal Nehru, who was Prime Minister for almost 17 years. His daughter Indira Gandhi held the office for almost 14 years. Manmohan Singh was Prime Minister of the UPA coalition for 10 years, from 2004 to 2014. A.B. Vajpayee of the Indian People's Party held the post for 6 years. The Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers conduct government business. Due to their dynastic traditions, important decisions are often made by the Prime Minister and his advisory staff without coordination and consultation with the respective ministries, such as the 1971 Indo-Soviet Friendship Treaty or the 1998 nuclear tests. Due to the increase in coalition governments in the 1990s, the smaller parties also had to take into account when allocating ministerial posts. If the government loses its majority in the Lok Sabha due to a defeat in a vote, the Prime Minister can request the dissolution of Parliament and new election from the President. The army and police, as the state's most important organs for external security and for enforcing the domestic monopoly of the use of force, are viewed very differently. The army is considered apolitical and, unlike countries like Pakistan, has never aspired to a political role, although it is increasingly used to combat internal insurgency. In contrast, the police force, which is the responsibility of the states, is seen as politicized, corrupt, and inefficient. There are repeated allegations that the police do not intervene or even take sides in riots between religious or caste groups. According to the constitution, the Indian parliament consists of the House of Representatives, so the lower house, the Lok Sabha, the Chamber of States, the Rajya Sabha, the upper house, and the president. The Lok Sabha corresponds to the German Bundestag, here in Germany where I'm sitting, and currently consists of 545 members. The legislative period is 5 years. The 28 states send 530 MPs, 13 MPs come from the 7 union territories, which are administered directly from New Delhi. The president can also appoint 2 representatives of the Anglo-Indian community to the Lok Sabha. The number of deputies from the states depends on the size of their population. Disadvantaged scheduled tribes and lower scheduled caste groups receive a number of reserved seats based on their state population. The main function of the Lok Sabha is to approve the budget. It controls the government through inquiries and can also submit a motion of no confidence, but its control function is generally considered to be low. One reason for this is the decades-long dominance of the Congress Party, which held 2/3 of the seats in 1971 and 4/5 in 1984 and was led by the Nehru-Gandhi dynasty. Furthermore, the smaller parties in particular hardly have the personnel capacity to adequately control the executive. The Rajya Sabha currently has 245 members, 233 of which are appointed by the states and 12 by the president. The number of deputies also depends on the size of the states. Of the union territories, however, only Pondicherry and Delhi send their own MPs to the upper house. Unlike the Lok Sabha, the Rajya Sabha cannot be dissolved. The terms of office of the deputies is 6 years. Every 2 years, 1/3 must stand for election. The Rajya Sabha is involved in the legislative process, but has fewer powers than the Lok Sabha and cannot, for example, table a motion of no confidence in the government. The members of parliament play a central role in the constituencies, as they are seen as the point of contact for the problems of the citizens and not the often inefficient administration. In addition, they have extensive financial resources of their own to develop their constituencies, which have also been misused for political patronage. The social change in Indian society is reflected in the changed social composition of parliament. In the first parliament, the upper caste of the Brahmins represented the largest groups. Today it is the middle castes of the other backward classes, or the OBCs. The increasing importance of regional parties since the 1990s is also an expression of social change in Indian society. The Indian Union has a comparatively simple electoral system. In a total of 543 single constituencies, MPs are elected to parliament with a simple majority of the votes, so it's first past the post system. The voting age has been 18 years since 1988, and the average turnout since the first elections in 51-52 has been around 60%. Despite an illiteracy rate of around 30%, it's still higher in India than in the USA. The distortions associated with the first past the post system can also be found in India. With a high competition for candidates, members of parliament were able to win a seat in parliament with just 23% of the votes cast. Although the Congress Party never received more than 48% of the vote, in 1984 it was able to win over 76% of the seats in parliament. Election agreements are therefore important for all parties in order to improve the chances for their candidates. Elections in India represent a considerable organizational undertaking. In the 2009 parliamentary elections, the Electoral Commission registered a total of over 714 million voters who were able to cast their votes using electronic voting machines at over 828,000 polling stations. Due to the precarious security situation in some regions, the elections were held in different phases and extended over several weeks. Despite various reforms, campaign finance remains a difficult area in India as well. While the Supreme Court has limited campaign spending for candidates, there are no equivalent rules for parties and candidate supporters. Given the widespread corruption and political patronage, black money plays an important role in election campaigns. After more than 65 years of independence, a stable democratic system has developed in India in which the separation of powers and federalism are the most important pillars, as I said. Despite countless problems, for example in the provision of public goods such as education, health and security, surveys shows that the population has a high level of support for democracy and its institutions, while politicians and the police enjoy a poor reputation due to corruption and patronage. Nevertheless, there are no significant veto actors who fundamentally question the system. The successes of Indian democracy lie in the inclusion of minorities and disadvantaged groups, for example, through the creation of new federal states for language groups, personal laws for religious communities, reserved seats for lower tribal and caste groups, or the 33% quota for internal residents. That means women in local self-government. The problems, on the other hand, lie in dealing with the social question, which has gained in importance again after 1991 as a result of economic liberalization. The priorities are the creation of jobs, the fight against corruption, and the expansion of education and healthcare in rural areas. The social problems in rural areas are seen as a breeding ground for militant communist groups, which the government classifies as the greatest domestic political threat. The UPA government had attempted to address these issues through a number of laws, such as the to Information Act in 2005, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, also in 2005, the Food Security Act in 2013, and the Comprehensive Anti-Counter-Corruption legislation, also in 2013. The political system is dominated by the executive, while parliamentary control is comparatively weak. This can be explained, among other things, by the increasing regionalization of the party landscape and the insufficient resources of the parliament. The government is now being controlled more strongly by the judiciary and critical reporting by the media. Non-governmental organizations that criticize the abuse and failures of government agencies have also gained in importance. The Independent Electoral Commission has issued a series of regulations to curb the growing criminalization of politics. Indian democracy faces various challenges. First, despite all the successes in reducing poverty, the provision of public goods such as education, health, and participation in economic development is still insufficient for large sections of the population. In 2012, 68% of the population lived on less than $2 a day. Second, the socio-cultural fragmentation of Indian society has forced so-called identity politics, in which more and more groups are demanding their right to political and economic participation. The publication of the figures on the size of the caste groups, which were collected in the 2011 census for the first time since 1931, might have further encouraged this development. And third, the corruption scandals of several years have pushed issues such as goods governments to the fore. This has given rise to new parties such as the Aam Aadmi Party, the AAP, which may be able to mobilize more issue-based voters across caste boundaries in the medium term. The functioning anarchy of the Indian Union is characterized by a high degree of institutional stability, even if there is a high degree of everyday political instability at the same time due to those coalition governments. The greatest achievement of the political system is its ability to produce reforms over and over again. However, due to the size and heterogeneity of the country, these will only progress slowly in India. and I hope I could bring you a slight overview. It's a vast country and a complex system, so I wanted to bring you an overview. And if you are interested in more, you have to study a bit, but I thought it was worth making a video about. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.